In today's video, we'll be exploring the events surrounding the largest bank robbery in Japan's history. This heist is considered one of the smartest thefts I've personally encountered, and the events that followed, including the investigation into the thief and the suspects, were so intriguing and bizarre that they'll surprise you. So make sure to stick around for the entire story. Welcome to Story Mix. Our story takes place in 1968, a time when Japan was experiencing a significant economic boom thanks to its leadership in the global technology revolution. Naturally, the banking sector was flourishing, making it an excellent target for thieves. Indeed, several major bank robberies occurred in Japan during this period, but among all those heists, there was one that stood out as the cleverest and the biggest. The story begins with the manager of a bank located in the capital, Tokyo, specifically the Nihon Trust Bank. One morning, the bank manager woke up and went to check his mailbox at home, which typically received utility bills and sometimes letters from family and friends. But on that day, the manager was shocked to find a strange letter from an unknown sender. Upon opening the letter, he was stunned by its contents. It contained a threat and a demand. The anonymous person requested the manager to gather 300 million yen and place it in a specified location, threatening that if his request was not fulfilled, he would blow up the manager's house with dynamite. The manager felt a wave of fear upon reading the letter and, naturally, reported it to the police immediately. Soon after, he discovered that another similar letter had arrived at his office at the bank. The threatening letters continued to arrive at both his home and the bank, all bearing the same request, 300 million yen and a threat to blow up his house. The police assigned officers to monitor the bank and the manager's home as a precautionary measure in case the unknown sender attempted to carry out his threat. The manager informed all employees of the threats and asked them to be on high alert for any potential dangers at any time. You might wonder why they didn't halt operations in light of such a serious threat. The answer is simple. We are in Japan, where work is considered sacred and must continue even in the most challenging circumstances. After several days of receiving threatening letters, specifically on December 10, 1968, the bank was required to deliver a large payment of 300 million yen to Toshiba. At that time, the company was distributing year-end bonuses to its employees, which were paid in cash. 4 bank employees were assigned to transport the money, which was packed into 3 large bags and loaded into a bank vehicle. While en route, a police officer on a motorcycle signaled them to stop. He informed them that the bank manager's house had been bombed, resulting in several injuries and possibly fatalities. The officer continued, explaining that there was a strong possibility that the unknown sender had planted bombs in the bank's vehicles, including the one they were in. He urgently requested that they check the car for any bombs under the seats. In a state of panic, the employees began searching the vehicle. Meanwhile, the officer crouched beneath the car to ensure there were no bombs. Suddenly, sparks and smoke began to rise from under the vehicle. The employees feared an explosion was imminent, so they opened the doors and fled. After a few moments, they realized the car hadn't exploded, and when they looked back, they found the car and the officer had vanished. The employees realized that the officer, who had pretended to be their savior, was actually the thief. He had deceived them into thinking there was a bomb and exploited their escape to steal the car containing 300 million yen. The same amount demanded by the anonymous sender. Investigators arrived at the crime scene and discovered evidence left behind by the thief, the most significant of which was a bicycle. The bicycle resembled police bikes, but it wasn't real. The thief had painted it white and added a loudspeaker, making it look like an actual police bike. According to the employees' descriptions, the thief had dressed in a police uniform so convincingly that it was impossible to distinguish him from a real officer. Even if not all the details are accurate, the employees' minds were clouded with fear and terror instilled by the thief, so we can't blame them for not noticing. Given the enormous sum stolen, the police took the matter very seriously, deploying over 10,000 officers throughout Tokyo and setting up hundreds of checkpoints on most major streets. The orders were to look for any black sedan, as that was the color of the bank's car, which added further pressure on the police and the ongoing searches. However, it didn't take long for the police to find the abandoned vehicle near a cemetery close to the robbery site. Next to it were tracks from another vehicle, indicating that the thief had swapped cars. Nonetheless, tracing the thief was not easy. They issued new orders at the checkpoints to search all vehicles. But this order came too late, as the thief had over an hour to bypass the barriers without issue, taking advantage of the chaos following the robbery. The next morning, news of the heist spread across all newspapers, and people were shocked not only by the large amount stolen, but also by the cunning execution of the robbery plan. The incident dominated the headlines, with media outlets racing to cover the story, increasing pressure on the police. Many people began to admire the thief for his intelligence, as he managed to deceive huge companies, raking in massive profits, and stole from them without harming anyone. Despite leaving behind a substantial amount of evidence, including the bicycle, the police were unable to find anything concrete. They attempted to trace the source of the bike and the loudspeaker on it, as well as the fireworks, but all their efforts hit dead ends. It turned out that the thief had stolen most of these items, making it impossible for the police to track him down. The police also tried to create a likeness of the thief based on the descriptions of the bank employees who were in the car, and this image was distributed across all media. More than 750,000 copies of the image were printed, ensuring that no one in Japan had not seen it. The case dragged on for years, and the police investigation became one of the largest in Japan's history. The number of suspects reached 110,000, with over 170,000 officers participating in the investigation. These were staggering numbers, and the investigation cost 900 million yen, more than double the amount stolen. These astonishing figures reflected the chaos and fear that engulfed Japanese society at that time. You might wonder why the government would spend such an amount to pursue a lesser sum. The answer is that their goal was not just to recover the money, but to demonstrate the authority and strength of the system and security. If the thief succeeded, it would encourage others to imitate him, leading to more robberies. Therefore, the government and police had to prove their presence and strength, making it clear that they would not tolerate such crimes. During the investigation, several key suspects emerged, and we'll tell the stories of 3 of them because their tales were strange and intriguing. The first suspect was actually the bank manager himself. While the police didn't directly accuse him, rumors circulated that he was the mastermind behind the plan. The reason for this suspicion was that the money transfer had to be discreet, known only to the manager, the employees in the car, and the officials from Toshiba. It was also noted that there was no security or escort for the vehicle, despite the enormous amount of 300 million yen inside. Given that the operation was supposed to be secret, how could an outsider have known about it? Another question arose regarding the threatening letters sent to the manager's home and office, as no one knew their source, even though the police were monitoring both locations after the initial threats. How did those letters continue to arrive at the manager's home and office without anyone noticing? These questions put the bank manager in the spotlight among the public, but the police did not consider him a suspect due to a lack of concrete evidence against him. Logically, being the manager, he could have found easier ways to steal the money if that was his intention. The second suspect had a sad and tragic story. His name was Taki Nakashoji, and he worked as a taxi driver. He was suspected because he lived near the bank and his appearance resembled the image created by the police using Photoshop. Of course, his driving skills as a taxi driver made him seem like a more credible suspect, but the police found no concrete evidence against him, so he was not arrested. However, during the investigations, information about him leaked to the media, and journalists wrote articles including his name and picture, turning him into a story featured in the newspapers. They officially claimed he was the thief and that he had been caught, despite the lack of solid evidence, simply because he resembled the image and happened to live near the bank. After his name spread in the media, the police decided to arrest him for further questioning to calm public opinion. After the investigation, they discovered he had a strong alibi for the time of the robbery, meaning it was impossible for him to be the culprit, so they released him and sent him back home. Unfortunately, after all those articles about him, his reputation was severely tarnished, to the point where he was fired from his job. His close friends suddenly abandoned him, not wanting to get involved in any trouble. In the end, due to the depression stemming from this case and the false accusation, this man tragically took his own life. This is a very sad and tragic story, and it has become a cautionary tale in Japan, serving as a reminder to any journalist or media worker to avoid publishing information about any suspect before confirming the presence of solid evidence against them. The third suspect was the strongest among all the accused, a 19-year-old named Sato Yoshiro. This young man belonged to a local gang, but surprisingly, his father was a police officer. I'm not sure how he got involved in the world of gangs while his father was on the side of law enforcement, but the important thing is that he had a criminal history, having been arrested for car theft. Investigations revealed that the thief had switched vehicles multiple times, and the police found several stolen cars used in the robbery. This bolstered the accusations against Sato, as he had excellent motorcycle riding skills, adding to the suspicions surrounding him. Additionally, his features closely resembled the image produced by the police. When investigators interrogated Sato, they discovered he had no alibi to prove his whereabouts during the robbery. Given that his father was a police officer, he had the knowledge to recognize details about police motorcycles and how to imitate them, as well as police uniforms and helmets, making him a prime candidate for suspicion. However, a major surprise occurred just hours before the police were set to arrest him. News reached law enforcement that this young man had died from a cyanide overdose in his home. The police conducted an investigation and concluded that his death was a suicide. They had no evidence to support any other conclusion, except that Sato decided to end his life after learning he would be arrested. But the matter didn't stop there. His death raised many questions. Many believed something strange was afoot. Two theories emerged about his death. The first suggested that his father, as a police officer, might have poisoned him to avoid the shame of having his son arrested and proven guilty. The second, less credible theory posited that the father was the real mastermind behind the operation and killed his son to cover up evidence. The more accepted theory suggested that the gang might have been responsible for Sato's death. Evidence indicated that the robbery was a joint effort among gang members, with some buying cars and houses after the heist. In fact, one gang member was arrested years later with a large sum of cash, and when asked about its source, he refused to answer. It is highly likely that this money was part of the stolen amount, and the gang members decided to eliminate Sato to avoid any repercussions, especially since his father was a police officer, which would complicate matters further. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence supporting this theory, the circumstantial evidence pointed more strongly in this direction. Over time, Sato Yoshiro became the primary suspect in the robbery, and despite investigations lasting 7 years, police announced in December 1975 that the case was closed without reaching a definitive conclusion. 20 years after the incident, specifically in 1988, according to Japanese law, the thief was exempt from any criminal consequences, meaning he could come forward and reveal himself without fear of arrest. Yet even today, no one has come forward or confessed to executing the robbery, and the case remains one of the unresolved mysteries in Japan. This brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated on new content. You can also watch these other amazing clips. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.